Thanks for showing up to this presentation. Our talk today will be all about user experience, specifically right to left language speakers. I hope this is going to be a fun one and hopefully someone might learn something or two. So my name is Mohammad Alsakhawy. I usually go by Mo. I also like to use my fan art of BoJack Horseman as a profile picture. I'm a software engineer and a recent computer science graduate. I've been using Django since 2021, and I've been an open source contributor since the start of this year, thanks to this amazing Djangonaut space program. My contributions has largely been to Django CMS, Django Bard content management systems. And for the duration of the last program session, I've been working on adding right to left styling to different Django CMS packages. So this was my topic of interest for a couple of months. And in this presentation, I'll try to share what I learned from my journey thus far. Who's this presentation for? Well, it's for people who are building web apps for a global audience. It's safe to assume that English is a universal language, but for some users, they would like to use their local languages, especially if your web app is based on user input. Not all languages use the same set of rules. Most notably, in my opinion, is the writing direction for a given language because it influences the UI by a lot. So you have languages that flow from left to right, others from right to left, others from top to bottom. It's a whole world of its own. As I've mentioned before, we're going to be talking about right to left languages, specifically Arabic, just because I'm an Arabic speaker. To start things off, um, uh, we'll talk about an easily solvable problem that causes a lot of frustration for Arabic speaking users, which is when you mix Arabic with other left to right languages, mostly English. So this is a completely reasonable thing to ask a person in normal conversation. It's well written, well understandable, even with proper punctuation. Now, this sentence is written from left to right because it's English. Now, what if I were to change the base writing direction for this sentence? Yeah, not much of a difference. Looks like the exclamation mark was reversed to what it looks like they started the sentence. But thinking about it again, the exclamation mark was at the end of the sentence when the direction was from left to right. Now it's right to left, so it's still technically at the end of the sentence. It's just because we reversed the base writing direction. So let's make this more complicated. I'm going to select a portion of the text and translate it to Arabic. Let's see what that gets us. Interesting. Reading the sentence from left to right, it says, "Punch me in the face, please do not." Yeah, that doesn't seem like it will cause any problems at all. So we basically went from this, but with improper text configuration, we got Yoda Speech, everybody. Yeah, yeah, and I'm not doing the voice. So you'd think this is a problem with the average web application, but no, you've got unicorns like Reddit, Discord, and LinkedIn, just to name a few examples that suffer from this problem. And you think, oh, configuring like multi-script writing direction, that sounds terribly difficult to do. But the reality is you just have to edit an HTML attribute. So it's not much work. So it's one of those problems that once you're aware of as a developer, it won't become a problem for your users anymore. So for our agenda today, we'll first talk about like localization and translating text, and then we'll cover right to left styling and some caveats like that you should be aware of if you decide to support right to left styling. So translating strings. First of all, I'd like to demystify some jargon that's likely to be mentioned while we're in this topic. The first thing is localization. Localization's goal is to make your app feel local to the user. So things like translating text, writing dates in the local formats, making the styles even look more local. A good example for this would be Wikipedia. I'd bet if everyone in this call tried to like open the same page of Wikipedia, you'll all get like different stuff depending on where you are in the globe. You maybe even get a banner or two about a local cause or something. And second thing is internationalization. Internationalization is for you as the developer to allow for localization to happen. So, for example, you make it easy for translators to translate text. You make it easy for users to change their language. You make it easy to localize the styling. It's essentially how you design the software to enable localization. So let's make this a bit practical with taking a look at a demo. And no, I won't go live. I'm not that comfortable. So here we have a simple demo with a simple view that renders an HTML template. That's called demo hello world.html. This is what's inside of that template, and this is the URLs.by file. And this is what the user will see when they send their request, and the HTML template is rendered. So I'll pause for a couple of seconds, and I suggest that you take a quick look at the code, or maybe even the things that I've highlighted. So the goal of this demo is to translate the highlighted text to Arabic. So Django has a system for translating strings. It's built on gettext, a GNU software framework. It's used for internationalization and localization for lots of software. So for us to translate the strings inside our demo application, there are three steps we have to follow. We first have to mark the strings we want to translate, and then we have to extract those marked strings into files that are called message files, and then we need to compile those files to be used at runtime. So first step, marking strings for translation. For that, we will wrap whatever string we want to translate with the getText function. It's usually aliased with an underscore to reduce typing time. Notice that we don't wrap every string we have in the program. We're just interested in the ones that will be shown to the end user. So in this view, we've marked the from Django string. As for the HTML template, we cannot use Python here first, but we can load the ITN template tags. Those template tags contain a tag that's called block translate. We will use that tag to wrap the string in the template that we want to mark for translation. Under the hood, this still uses getText. And now the first step is done. We'll go to the second one, which is extracting those strings that we just marked. And we can do that but by using the make messages command. Since we want to translate the messages to Arabic, we're passing the language code of Arabic to the command, which is AR. Once that's done, you'll notice a new directory in your project's locale directory with the language code specified. Inside that file, there will be a file called Django.bo. This file contains the messages we're interested in, and this is what it looks like. The generation of those message files is done by the GNU getText utilities, and they have a specific format. First, we have a command dictating which file those messages were extracted from, and then we have pairs of message IDs and message strings. The message ID will contain the marked string that we just marked, and the message strings will be the translation of those marked strings. Of course, they start off empty, and it's the job of the translators to fill those up. Once we've successfully translated our message files, we'll need to have them compiled. To do that, we'll use the compile messages command, which will generate a new file, Django.mo file. The reason we compile those files is so that they can be loaded into memory for the gettext runtime library to translate the strings while Django is running. What you see on the screen just a hex dump of a couple of lines from the Django.mo file, probably some headers. And so gettext, we've mentioned it a lot. What is it? Well, it's a framework of tools for translating text. Those tools follow a set of conventions. So the way text is marked, how they are compiled into message files, how the message files are formatted, and uh, we have like two versions of the message files, the ones that are human readable for translators, the .bo files, and the binary ones for the machines. It's a popular schema. It's also a directory and file naming organization. It's how those different message files are stored. And a runtime for the translation lookup. So again, it's a framework of tools that essentially separates development from translation. So now that we've translated strings, we're introduced to a new problem, which is which language to render. Well, of course, the user's language, but how can we get that? Well, Django's got our back with Locale middleware. Um, It's got a language discovery algorithm for detecting the user's current language. And it goes like this. It first checks the UR for a language prefix. So for this URL, example.com/AR, it can deduce that the language here is Arabic. And it will like get the Arabic version of the page. If we don't have a language prefix in the URL, it will default to using a cookie that the default name for the cookie is Django language. And if we don't have a prefix in the URL and we don't have the cookie, it will check the accept language HTTP header. And if we don't find any of this, it will fall back to the system-wide language, which is set at the language code setting. This is how we use the Locale middleware, just like put it in the middlewares. And if you like want to internationalize the URL, the prefix we just talked about, there is a function called item patterns, which wraps all of URLs so that like it will prefix like the URLs with the current language. And for example, if you copy paste the page's URL, it will contain the language code, so it will render like that page in that specific language. So it will like look something like this. So after following the previous steps, our demo should look something like this. The strings in the views and the templates are marked. The messages in the Django.bo files are translated and compiled. The local middleware is included, and the URLs are internationalized to include the language prefix. Once we did all that, and the user goes to our /AR website, they should get that translated text, and boom, we've localized our like backend. We've translated it. Now it's time for the UI. Okay, this is a tool of interest, right to left styling game. So I view right to left styling as a quick UI win. Why? Well, I made this chart, and as you can see, I wrote RTL support as a low effort, high impact feature. So justify my personal bias and to make myself look smart. But seriously, as we've seen, I mean, modern CSS has made this way easier, and you have a large user base that speak right to left languages. So it's a bit justifiable to put it as a low effort, high impact feature. To back my low effort statement, this is how you would solve most of RTL styling problems. You just have to set the HTML attribute and to use CSS logical properties. So what is this dir attribute? What does it do? Well, it's an enum that indicates the base writing direction for a given HTML element or the whole HTML document. And it has three values. So the first one and the default one is L2R or left to right. The second one is RTL or left to right, and the third one is auto. So L2R is the correct writing direction for English, but not for RTL languages like Arabic. So remember, if English has the incorrect writing direction, it's Yoda Speech. So is Arabic with the incorrect writing direction. And auto, which is mostly used with form inputs, it automatically detects the correct writing direction from the first character that gets put into the input. So, for example, if the first character that was inputted was a T as in test, the writing direction would be left to right. If it was an Arabic character, it would be evaluated to right to left. Yeah, neat. So we'll talk a bit practically again. This is how you can programmatically set their attribute based on the user's current user's language and Django templates. I've yanked this code from the Django CMS frontend package. Um, so this Django CMS frontend HTML template is kind of a base template. That's why you can see the HTML tag. Now the steps to set their attribute programmatically is first, well, the I18 template tags. We've seen them before. They are your friend when you're doing internationalization. The second thing would be getting whether or not the current user's language is right to left. You can do that by using the get current language by die. It's yeah, the name is confusing, but what it essentially does is it evaluates to true if the current language is right to left, and it will evaluate to false if the current language direction is left to right. And the final step would be to render the correct value for their attribute. So if it's L to R, if get current language by die is false, R to L if it's true, and fall back to auto. Okay, now let's take a step back. This is what we essentially started with. Like this is an abstract UI. It's a page with a left to right, right in direction, and a styling and a UI that follows that right in direction. So the HTML elements flow from left to right. After we've set the dir attribute to RTL, the writing direction got fixed. No more Yoda speech, but the HTML elements still follow the left to right in direction. The items still flow from left to right, which is kind of unnatural if you're reading this way. So to fix that, we need to use some CSS. One way to do that is to have a big rtl.css file, and that file will basically mirror the CSS attributes to adapt to the new right to left styling. This is what Django uses at the moment, by the way. So instead of like having left zero, we'll use right zero instead of batting right, batting left, and so on. But it's a bit too much. You'll have to write the styling twice, one for LTR, one for RTL. You'll also be more likely to get a regression, and you may forget to update this RTL.css file here and there. And luckily, we have a solution. It's called CSS logical properties. So what that enables us to do is instead of writing the CSS properties, which explicitly mentions a physical direction like left and right, instead of writing the CSS twice, we'll write the logical properties and then let the browser handle like the rest. This is what it will look like. Instead of left and right, we'll say inline start and inline end. The start and end would be converted to left and right by the browser based on the base direction. So when the base writing direction is LTR, so going from left to right, the inline start would be left start. And when the base direction is right to left, so going from right to left, the inline start would be right. The same goes for inline end when the base direction is LTR, so we're going from left to right, so inline end would be right. And when the base direction is RTL, we're going from right to left, so inline end would be left. Yeah, that's the idea. So I want you to focus on the window in the middle. It's what you will write. That would be equivalent if you were to write the CSS twice for each writing direction. So less CSS, less heading. Um, we also have CSS logical values. They follow the same idea. You have like write values with logical directions instead of physical ones, and the browser will handle the rest. Um, let's take a moment to appreciate that before we move on to the next slide. Okay, that's enough. So there's a universal rule in software engineering. There are no magic solutions. You always have to compromise. There's no exception with the current state of CSS logical properties. Fortunately, they're not that bad, and it's absolutely worth it to use them. Now, what are those compromises? The first one is unsupported properties and values. There are still some properties and values with no logical equivalence. There are not that many, but you need to be aware of them. And properties that are recently introduced to browsers, they also fall under this category. You don't want your site to crash when a slightly older browser is used. There's also a problem with icons. So, for example, if they explicitly represent a physical direction, like something pointed to the left or the right, yeah, of course there are different solutions to this problem, but here's what we did at Django CMS. So let's say we want to convert the following logical properties. Everything would be just fine except for float right. Despite having logical values, this was just recently introduced to some browsers. For example, doesn't work on Chrome 117 from 2023. So we chose to use the dir pseudo class. This acts like kind of a if statement. If the direction is RTL, float to the left. Otherwise, float to the right. Like this way, we don't break the styling with like logical properties, logical values. This also can solve the icons issue. We can transform them however we like if the direction becomes right to left. Yep, cool. You'd think problems would stop here, but no. Their pseudo class suffers from the same problem as the logical values for the float property. It was just introduced to browsers. Um, so as a final solution, we made a patch for the dir pseudo class, and the way that works is if the user is using an older browser and that browser does not understand what this dir pseudo class means, it defaults to using the dir attribute selector on a parent element as an alternative. The catch here is if the parent element must have that dir attribute set. If it's absent, this won't work. So it must have the dir attribute set. Um, Now you might say that we're back at the same point. When we use the big RTL.css file, we have like some duplication here, like for like this specific case, but it's not exactly that. This patch is only for edge cases. If you want support older browsers that don't understand what their slow class means, also, once the majority of your users shift to newer versions, you can just drop that batch. Finally, the last thing to be aware of is JavaScript, which sets physical directions dynamically, something like this. And to be honest, I don't know if a quick way out of this, you just, yeah, you just have to think about it and debug it and fix it yourself. Sorry. Um, so this is the end of the presentation. It took way shorter than I thought. But so to give a quick summary of what we've covered, if you want to enhance the user experience of your right to left language speaking users, translate your strings, set their attribute, and use CSS logical properties. Thank you.